Hey, mate.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Well, thank you for chatting with me. I know you're well. I was going to say you're not close. Uh,
No, I'm as far away as I could possibly be from. Were you in Toronto?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. You're
yeah.
far enough away that if that you would any further and you'd be
Be
coming
better
back.
to go. It'd be better to go over the top.
That's
Yeah,
fair. No, it's a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much.
cheers, man.
Nitram is it's wild. It's excellent
Well,
across
thank
the
you.
board,
Cheers.
but the film, I will admit, going in, I knew nothing, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
nothing about it. And as the film began, like I didn't even know that it was about the shootings.
yeah,
I thought, oh, this is going to be a wonderful film about family working through mental health issues, and then it jukes uh, pretty
yeah.
hard to the left, and
It's really interesting, you know. It's. So I think Sean and I made this film with Australians in mind. In that, you know, it was such a seismic event here. Everyone kind of knows of it. And, so every scene in the film has a has some pretty heavy baggage to it, and
mm,
and context to it. But when we played it in Cannes, similar to experience to what you had, when people were not aware of what was going to happen at the end, it kind of does play as this sort of dysfunctional family drama, um, and kind of creeps up on you in terms of the 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 sort of slow dismantling and the kind of car crash, which is that character. But yeah, it does play very differently, and if you're aware or unaware of the events.
well, actually, that was one of the things I was wondering about. Is I mean, of course, it premiered at Cannes. Now I'm seeing it for the first time, but I know what has the response been different based on where it has been shown. Like, are people in the U.S. responding to it differently than say in Australia, New Zealand? Like, I was wondering, have you noticed a difference there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, in Australia, there was a really strong debate about whether a film like this could be made or not, and
Mm,
whether you can make a film also about that point of view,
mm,
of that character, um, and that's sort of something that we've tried to tread really carefully in Australia, and it's there are definitely those that wish it never been made, and then there are others that um, have been open to having a discussion and a conversation about that pretty dark shadow over our kind of recent history, and also about gun reform, but probably um, more about, I guess, how we look after each other and how we watch out for each other, and what our relationship is with those that sort of fall between the cracks.
mm.
So, and they're really difficult conversations to have, and they're tricky. So I think in Australia it's been very loaded, and um, and very and controversial. Whereas I think, having just been over to the States and watching it over there, it's an everyday occurrence in America. So I think when we were filming in November 2020, I think it just passed 480 mass shootings just in the year, in the States. So it's overwhelming, I think, and there's something sort of every day about these mass shootings in America, and suddenly having a conversation about gun reform it's really complicated, and it's and you can feel the fatigue in people. And we felt that too with having Caleb, who's Texan, and um, having that American perspective on set was really interesting. But definitely it's viewed in a very different way, from how it came out in Australia to the way it's sort of, I guess, played in America.
Yeah, I admit I knew nothing of the events personally. I knew nothing of the events that took
Yeah.
place in '96, and you can see, from everything I've read, since seeing the film. I mean, you can see that this has left a mark. This is, like you said, this is one of these stories that
Well,
what
it was.
more
I mean,
should be
what?
told.
Yeah. Look, what people I think forget too is it was a single. It was the biggest single mass shooting that had occurred,
Yeah.
in the world. So it was,
Oh, globally.
globally at the time. It
Oh,
was, it
wow.
was,
I didn't
yeah,
realize.
it was the worst single person mass shooting that had happened. That many casualties. Um, so you can imagine that happening in Australia, in not only Australia but in Tasmania, which is this sort of beautiful, very peaceful, isolated state and community.
Mm.
It just rocked and shifted the country. It was sort of broke its heart, and the response was pretty extraordinary in regards to sort of gun reform happening and buyback schemes happening in terms of buying back semi-automatic weapons. That all happened in 6 days. So it was seismic enough and shocking enough to change things, kind of, um, totally changed the gun culture in Australia.
Yeah. Now, at the end of the film, though, you mentioned, I mean, in the credits, you talk about that, how quickly the reform came in. But you also mentioned that a lot of the states and provinces don't enforce those things.
Well,
Uh, has it made a
that's
difference?
what sort of shocked me is that there's a lot of those reforms that just didn't just weren't implemented,
Hmm.
and uh, and there's some pretty fierce gun lobbying at the moment to weaken those reforms. So it's been 25 years since the massacre, and I was quite alarmed at how much pressure is coming on those reforms, and this sort of wave of needing to change them. Was something that took Sean and I, the writer, by surprise.
Hmm. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And there is that scene that, to me, like, from Toronto, being from Toronto, that is, it's both so horrific but also almost funny when he's buying the guns, and the man says, "Oh, do you have your license?" He says, "No, I didn't know I needed one." And he's like, "Yeah, I have money. Yeah,
Well,
it's fine."
yeah,
And it was like, I sat there watching it, like, wait, what?
it's absurd. It. Look, to be honest, it was probably the scene that um, is one of the most important scenes in the film. In that, when I first read it, I was amazed at how Sean was sort of taking me into the step by step, intimate kind of um, journey and dismantling of this character, and at that moment that they sort of become the most, you're really starting not to trust them, and there's a real sense of danger about this character and isolation.
Mm.
Is this absurd scene? And you're right. It's so absurd. It's almost laughable that someone that you've been traveling with, that you really know, should not be walking into a gun shop with a bag full of money and buying guns like golf clubs.
Yeah.
That there was something about that scene and the absurdity of it that really spoke to me about the importance of gun reform, like nothing I'd kind of read before or heard in discussion. There was just a feeling about that scene, and especially how it was set up with the lead up to it, that was really powerful. And probably the scene that made me want to do the film.
Mm. Well, with all your research and all the preparation before the film, was there anything that surprised you, or what surprised you most about Martin Bryant? I mean, this about the real Martin Bryant, or about the character.
Look, I think what was interesting, and living here in Tasmania, what's interesting is, I guess, how visible that person was in the 90s. That that everyone sort of has a story about seeing this person, and seeing this person in different outfits and different kind of personalities and character, where they, where he was brought up, where he lived and where he went to school is in a pretty sort of affluent area now. It's in North Hobart, and it's middle class Australia. It's not some sort of disenfranchised area or community. That it's actually something very familiar. It's a cul-de-sac at the end of the road. It's it's surprising how kind of ordinary it is. So that was something that probably surprised me quite a bit. I was wondering whether it was similar to my first film, Snowtown, where it was, that this family were kind of amongst a community that was struggling, but they weren't. It was middle Australia.
Wow. Well, one of the things, this film too, as I said when I started off, like this film's very willing to explore the I don't know if dangers is the word, but certainly the effects of mental health in this sort of scenario, but also in the family. I was wondering what was most important for you to show about that on screen.
Well, I think through the characters, just how overwhelming it is, to live with mental health, but also be surrounded by the struggles of mental health. And I wouldn't just say the one character in the film, the perpetrator. I would, it's obviously something that plays with all the characters in the film.
Very much so.
And it's the way in which each of these characters deal with it and struggle with it and try to find answers with each other. And I think the film sort of speaks to the inadequacies at the time in the 90s in Tasmania in regards to how we dealt with mental illness and the perception of it and how we medicated it. So it's definitely a very strong part of the film, and it runs through all the characters, I think, in the film.
Absolutely, the father as well, and his mother, the most wonderful mother I've seen on screen in a long time. She's a piece of work. The performances are incredible, but I just mean the character is just I think Judy Davis just brought a perspective there that was really nuanced. It was something that definitely evolved. I think probably in the script she was a little colder, but I think Judy kind of brings a sense of, gosh, how hard would it be to be a mother of this kid, and really challenging herself as to kind of like, is it something I've done? Is it something in my DNA? Is it my husband's fault? Is it, what she is a character that's kind of is searching. I mean, that one particular scene when she asks Helen, why do you like him? What do you see in him? It's a genuine question. She sees a woman that adores her son, and she struggles to adore her child. So she's sort of asking those questions from a stranger as to kind of, am I missing something? What do you see? And it's a really powerful and sort of poignant, question from the mother. I think the film definitely developed in regards to what parenting is and what that mother's perspective is, and how the father handles it, which is kind of pretty much to enable, give him a lolly to kind of calm him down a bit. But yeah. And I think he even says at one point, I think he says, he's talking to Helen. He says, "You give me what I want when I ask," or something like that. Yeah. It's just so flatly, like, this is what a relationship is, right? I ask you, and you give me this.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I think that's when he wants to buy He wants to
Oh,
buy a gun.
buy a gun. That's the first time he wants to buy a gun. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I realize this is a really difficult question to ask as we're starting to wrap up, but I guess I guess one of the things I see in this film is I mean, we start off with Martin, and he's certainly, I don't know if he's an innocent folk, but he's certainly not the character we see at the end of the film. I was wondering what it is that you think creates creates our monsters, and I don't even know if that's a fair term here, but the idea that would lead to this horrific finale. What is it that you think creates that?
Oh, look, I think it's. I mean, I think it's what the film does is really explore the many different things that I guess add up to
Mm,
someone making just a horrific choice.
mm,
And the one thing I do, having done research on um, people that have sort of committed these sort of acts, one thing that is really familiar uh, and common is just how isolated those people become
mm,
before the events. There seems to be a kind of time where there's a complete kind of hermit-like, disconnect with people, and I think that that's sort of something that definitely happened with this character,
mm.
and you can sort of feel it in the film. This sort of uh, sense of isolation becomes really palpable, especially sort of him being in that large house of Helen's, and um, but I don't think we came out of making this film and going, oh, that's it, that's the reason as to kind of why this event occurred, or these events occur. I think it's always a number of things, and but it is about how we look after each other, and it is about kind of keeping an eye on those that are struggling and those that are becoming more isolated, and I guess questioning our responsibility, in preventing, those people from kind of disconnecting to community.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, again, I understand it's such a complex issue. There's no one answer. I appreciate your honesty there. Thank you so
No
much.
worries. No, no worries.
Honestly, the film is wonderful. It is a difficult watch,
Yeah.
but for the best reasons. It's very well
Yeah.
done. The cast is great, and I genuinely thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. No problems.
All right, thanks so much. Have a good day.